When you think about India, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For me, it's this massive, incredibly complex tapestry. So many cultures, languages, all under one system.
And the big question is always, how is this mammoth entity actually held together?
Exactly. Is India a true federation, like the United States where states came together? Or is it something else entirely? A centralized system that just looks federal on the outside?
I mean, the very fact that our Constitution calls it a union of states and not a federation, that's the first clue.
Right. And then you have these powerful central agencies like the All India Services operating deep inside state boundaries. It's this confusing, fascinating, and sometimes really frustrating duality that is the core dilemma of the Indian state.
It's the ultimate balancing act. And for anyone trying to master Indian polity, especially for competitive exams,
Yeah.
understanding this delicate, often lopsided balance, it's everything. You have to know the federal parts, but you also have to know the unitary levers that keep it all from flying apart.
Okay, let's unpack this structural masterpiece. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a surgical approach to the very foundations of India's constitutional structure.
We're pulling out the essential high-yield insights directly from the go-to text for Indian polity and Laxmikanth's definitive work. We're focusing entirely on the federal system. That's Chapter 14.
And our mission for you, the listener, isn't just to summarize. It's to distill the absolutely critical, nuanced knowledge you need to master this topic quickly, thoroughly, and accurately for your preparation.
We're breaking down the architecture that lets a country as vast as India function. We're going to look at the pillars of federalism and then the overwhelming constitutional gravitational pull of the center. This is about analysis, not just definitions.
Before we dive headfirst into the articles and amendments, just a quick word to all of you who make these deep dives possible. If you find this content useful, and we know from your feedback that it is, please take a moment right now to subscribe, like this video, and share your valuable comment on the episode. Your engagement, it really helps us reach more aspirants.
And for those of you who are able to support us a bit more, please do consider joining the paid membership on YouTube. A huge shout out and a massive thank you to all of our existing members. Your support is absolutely essential.
It really is. It allows us to keep bringing this dense, crucial, and super useful content to you week after week. We are deeply, deeply grateful.
And don't forget your study materials.
Oh, absolutely. We provide free notes that summarize all of this, plus practice previous year questions or PYQs relevant to these concepts. They're always available on our Telegram channel.
And for our Legend YouTube members, you get the premium stuff. Premium notes, extra PYQs, and detailed model mains answers, all exclusively on our Discord channel. So do join there to really maximize your preparation.
Okay, let's start at the absolute beginning, the constitutional text itself, Article 1. It famously states, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states.
And the key here is the deliberate omission. The architects of the Constitution, especially Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, they actively chose not to use the word federation.
So what's the big deal? Why does avoiding that one word matter so much?
It's fascinating, really. With that single word, union, they preemptively solved two enormous potential problems. It was about national unity and sovereignty. The term itself carries two foundational implications.
And the first one is about how the union was born, right?
Precisely. First, the Indian Federation is explicitly not the result of an agreement among the states. Unlike the U.S. model, where sovereign states came together and basically signed a contract to create a federal government,
India was different.
Totally different. Indian states were either created by the Union or they were already non-sovereign entities within the framework that we inherited from the Government of India Act of 1935. It was a top-down creation, not a voluntary contract between equals.
So it was never a partnership negotiated between sovereign powers. That changes the entire power dynamic from day one.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the second equally powerful implication, which tackles disunity head-on. No state has the right to secede from the Union.
None.
The Union is paramount, it's indivisible, it's perpetual. This was non-negotiable for them. They made sure that the act of union could never be challenged constitutionally.
That structural choice right there makes India so unique among classic federations. But okay, while the label is union, the day-to-day functionality is clearly federal in many ways. Let's lay out those core structural pillars, the federal features, that give India its dual nature.
The first one is the most obvious. It's the establishment of a dual polity. You have the union at the center and the states at the periphery. And crucially, each is given sovereign powers in their own fields, as laid out in the Constitution.
A clear division of labor.
A clear division, yes. So the union government handles the big national stuff, defense, foreign affairs, currency, communications.
While the states manage the local and regional needs, things like public order, policing, health, agriculture. It's a fundamental distribution of power guaranteed by the Constitution.
And that separation of power has to rely on the second pillar, a written constitution. The Indian Constitution is an enacted, incredibly detailed document.
The longest in the world, in fact.
And that length, that level of detail, it was deliberate. They knew they had to minimize ambiguity and clearly draw the lines of power between the center and all these diverse regional units. That wasn't something, say, the U.S. framers felt they needed to do to the same extent.
And a written document immediately brings us to the third pillar, the supremacy of the Constitution.
Exactly. It's the supreme law of the land, the foundational text, the Grundnorm. Every action, whether it's executive or legislative from the center or the states, has to conform to it. Any law that violates it is void, period.
Okay, the fourth pillar is structural. It's about Parliament itself, bicameralism, the two houses.
A classic federal mechanism. It's all about balancing power. You have the Lok Sabha, representing the people directly based on population. That's democratic accountability.
And then crucially, you have the Rajya Sabha, the Council of State.
Which represents the states themselves. This dual representation is a constitutional check. It makes sure that laws, especially those affecting state interests, are debated in a chamber specifically designed to protect state voices at the national level.
And finally, the fifth pillar, the one that protects all of this, the independent and integrated judiciary with the power of judicial review.
This one is so important because it highlights both a federal feature and a unitary tendency.
How so?
Well, while India has the independent judiciary you need for federalism, it's not like the U.S. with separate federal and state court systems. India has an integrated judicial system. The Supreme Court is at the top, and it enforces both union and state laws. That ensures a uniform legal interpretation across the whole country.
Which is a pretty strong unitary bias in how it's administered.
It is, but its function is fundamentally federal. The Supreme Court acts as the interpreter and the ultimate defender, the guarantor of the Constitution and our fundamental rights.
And judicial review is the tool it uses.
Absolutely. That power of judicial review lets the judiciary strike down any law from Parliament or a state legislature if it violates a constitutional provision. It's the ultimate safety valve that keeps the federal division of powers from being just words on a page. If the center tries to encroach, the judiciary is supposed to stop it.
Okay, so the Supreme Court is there to guarantee those federal features hold. But that guarantee is constantly being tested by other features that are intentionally designed to lean unitary.
This is where we get to the heart of why experts call India quasi-federal, or a unitary state with federal features. It's rarely called a purely federal state.
Let's start with the feature that just dramatically undermines state sovereignty, the indestructibility paradox.
This is probably the strongest sign of this central bias. The Indian Federation is famously called an indestructible union of destructible states.
Destructible states. That phrase just hits you.
It's meant to.
Yeah.
It directly attacks the idea of state autonomy that you see in other federations. The union itself can't be broken up by secession, but the identity, the boundaries, even the very existence of the states, that's fragile.
And how does the Constitution allow for that fragility? What's the mechanism for destroying a state?
It's Parliament. Parliament has the unilateral power, under Article 3, to change the area, boundaries, or name of any existing state.
Unilateral power.
And here's the crucial part. It can do this with just a simple majority. It only needs to consult the state legislature. It doesn't need its consent. The state assembly's opinion is just, well, it's just an opinion. Parliament can completely ignore it.
That is just a staggering contrast with, say, the U.S., where state boundaries are sacrosanct without the state's permission. Here, Parliament can just redraw the political map with a regular law.
It's monumental. When you compare it to the American Federation, which is an indestructible union of indestructible states, the difference is not subtle. It's existential for the states. Our structure clearly prioritizes national unity and administrative convenience over the political integrity of the states.
Okay, moving on from territory, let's look at legal and administrative unity. We have a single constitution and single citizenship.
Right. True federations often have separate constitutions for the federal government and the states, and sometimes dual citizenship. India just has one constitution for the whole country, and every citizen is just an Indian citizen. It emphasizes the national identity above all else.
And this unified administration is enforced by a really powerful tool of central influence. The All India Services, the IAS, IPS, and IFOS.
The AIS is probably the most potent unitary feature you see in everyday governance. These are elite officers recruited and trained by the center through the UPSC, but they hold the top jobs in the state administrations.
So they serve both the center and the states.
Yes, often rotating between the two. This creates an administrative uniformity, and it gives the central government direct, continuous influence over how states are run, even on subjects that are totally on the state list, like law and order.
And while the state government has day-to-day control over these officers,
The ultimate control recruitment, training, discipline, their entire career path lies firmly with the center.
and that's where the friction comes in.
That's where the tension is. The system is designed for national coherence, which is good, but it often leads to accusations of political misuse, where the center is accused of using transfers or disciplinary action to influence states that aren't on the same page politically. The state administration is, in a way, perpetually reliant on the center's goodwill.
Which brings us right to the controversial appointment of the governor. The governor is the head of the state executive, but they are appointed by the president, which really means the central government.
Yes, another clear channel for central interference. The governor is the center's representative, their agent in the state, and their powers are immense in a unitary sense. They can reserve state bills for the president's approval, giving the center a veto, and their report on the failure of constitutional machinery is the usual trigger for imposing president's rule under Article 356.
A dual role that is a constant source of political friction.
A constant source. Finally, we should touch on constitutional flexibility. A rigid constitution is usually seen as a hallmark of a true federation.
To make sure the power balance can't be easily changed.
Exactly. But while some core federal principles in India are part of the basic structure and need special amendment processes, many significant parts of the Constitution can be amended by Parliament through just ordinary lawmaking. A simple majority. This flexibility means the balance of power can be tilted towards the center relatively easily.
All right, so that detailed separation of powers is laid out in Articles 245 to 255. On paper, it looks federal, but the way it's distributed just ensures the center keeps the upper hand. Let's get into the distribution of legislative subjects, the 3 lists in the 7th schedule.
It's a comprehensive system. You've got the Union List, List 1, which gives Parliament exclusive power over about 100 subjects, things like defense, atomic energy, currency.
National importance.
Right. Then you have the State List, List 2, which gives states exclusive power over around 61 subjects, local stuff like police, public health, agriculture. And finally, the Concurrent List, List 3, with 52 subjects where both can make laws: criminal law, education, forests.
Well, what happens when they conflict? If there's an overlap on the concurrent list, who wins?
The central law prevails. It's as simple as that. There's a tiny escape hatch where if a state law gets the president's assent, it can prevail in that state, but even then, Parliament can come back later and pass another law to override it. So central legislative dominance is clearly established.
And what about things that aren't on any list? New things that come up, the residuary powers.
Those go to the center. Any subject that's not on one of the 3 lists. Think about things like cybercrime or space technology that the framers couldn't have imagined. It automatically falls under Parliament's exclusive jurisdiction. The Sarkaria Commission also noted that the center's residuary powers of taxation also remain with Parliament.
So the center has the final say on what's listed, and it gets anything that's not listed. This dominance is then cemented by the center's ability to just step onto the state list in certain situations.
Even during normal times, sometimes, there are 5 critical situations where Parliament can legislate on state list subjects, effectively suspending the federal division.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first, and maybe the most politically interesting, is when the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution under Article 249. If the Rajya Sabha, the House of the States, declares by a special 2/3 majority that it's in the national interest for Parliament to make a law on a state list matter, Parliament gets that power for 1 year.
Which is so paradoxical. The state's own representative body is what enables the center's encroachment.
It is, and this is also linked to creating new All India services under Article 312, another instance where the upper house initiates a move that increases central control.
Okay, what about the second and third situations?
Those are tied to crises. During a national emergency, Article 352, the whole system becomes unitary. Parliament can legislate on any subject in the state list for the whole country. And if President's rule, Article 356, is imposed on a state, Parliament gets the power to make laws for that specific state. It basically becomes the state legislature.
And the fourth ground is about foreign policy.
Yes, the implementation of international treaties under Article 253. Parliament can legislate on any state list matter to fulfill India's international obligations. This makes sense. You can't have one state blocking a national commitment.
And the fifth one seems more collaborative, when states request it.
It does. Under Article 252, if two or more state legislatures ask Parliament to make a law on a state subject, Parliament can do it. That law then applies only to those states, though others can adopt it later. It starts with state consensus, but the end result is still Parliament legislating on state turf.
Beyond making laws, the center has huge administrative leverage. This is where the executive power comes in, mainly through giving directions.
The Constitution gives the center wide-ranging powers to issue directions to state governments on how to use their executive powers.
But the real teeth are in Article 365. That's the enforcement mechanism.
It is the ultimate constitutional threat. Article 365 says that if a state fails to comply with any direction from the Union, the President can decide that the government of the state can no longer be carried on according to the Constitution.
Which is a direct justification for imposing President's rule under Article 356.
Exactly. It means compliance with central directions is not optional. It is constitutionally mandatory, with the risk of dismissal hanging over every state government.
Okay, the power to tax and spend. This is really the ultimate test of any federation. Fiscal federalism is often where that unitary bias is felt most acutely. So let's look at the core of tax sharing and distribution.
Fiscal relations are primarily structured by Articles 269A and 270. Article 270 is the big one. It mandates that almost all taxes levied and collected by the Union have to be shared and distributed between the Union and the states. That's the basis of vertical devolution.
Right, ensuring states get a piece of the national pie. And 269A is specific to GST.
Yes, the goods and services tax on interstate trade. But to manage this whole distribution process, how much to share, which states need more, the Constitution creates a special body under Article 280, the Finance Commission.
The Finance Commission is basically the referee of fiscal balance. How often is it appointed?
The President appoints one every 5 years. Its main job is twofold. First, recommend how the tax revenue should be split between the Union and the states, and second, determine the principles for giving grants and aid to the states from the Consolidated Fund of India. It's meant to be a non-political, expert-driven process.
And beyond that statutory share of taxes, states also get grants. I know there are two major types, statutory and discretionary.
That's right. Statutory grants under Article 275 are determined by Parliament based on the Finance Commission's recommendations. They go to states that are deemed to need financial help, to close revenue gaps or fund development.
And then you have discretionary grants, which give the center a lot more flexibility and political power.
A lot more. These are under Article 282. The center is empowered to make these grants, but it's not obligated to. Historically, the Planning Commission used to wield enormous power through these grants. They give the center huge leverage over state priorities, which leads to criticism that they undermine the objective resource sharing done by the Finance Commission.
Now, what about tax immunity? States are generally immune from central taxes, but there was a crucial court clarification in 1963.
Yes, this was important for protecting the Union's core fiscal power. The Supreme Court gave an advisory opinion that the state's immunity from central taxes does not extend to customs duties or excise duties.
So the center can tax goods a state imports or manufactures.
Exactly, just like a private company. It stops states from getting an unfair competitive advantage or messing with national trade by claiming constitutional immunity.
And finally, we have to talk about the elephant in the room of fiscal federalism. The Goods and Services Tax GST Council. This was a seismic shift.
Absolutely. The GST Council was created by the 101st Amendment Act, inserting Article 279A. It's a unique body because it's a joint forum of the center and all the states, and it makes recommendations on almost every aspect of GST.
It's the poster child for cooperative federalism, but its voting structure that still shows the central gravity, doesn't it?
The technical detail is critical here. For a decision to pass in the GST Council, you need a majority of at least 3/4, that's 75% of the weighted votes.
And how are the votes weighted?
The central government's vote is weighted as 1/3 of the total, and the votes of all the state governments combined are weighted as 2/3.
So wait, the center has a 1/3 weight, and you need a 3/4 majority. That means the center has a veto. Nothing can pass without its support.
Exactly. And conversely, the states, if they act together, can block any move from the center. It forces a genuine consensus.
It formalizes cooperation, but ensures the center is always at least an equal partner.
A huge change from before 2016, when indirect tax policy was basically unilateral. Now cooperation is baked into the system.
So with all this inherent unitary bias we've talked about, the system needs some safety valves. It needs bodies to manage conflict and encourage cooperation. That's where cooperative federalism comes in.
And the primary constitutional tool for this is the Interstate Council under Article 263.
Article 263 is an enabling provision, right? It lets the president set one up.
Yes, if it's in the public interest. And its functions are all about mediation and harmony between states.
And what are those key functions?
There are three. First, to inquire into and advise on disputes between states. Second, to investigate and discuss subjects of common interest. And third, to make recommendations for better policy coordination. It's supposed to be the main forum for intergovernmental talks.
And I remember the Sarkaria Commission really emphasized the need to make this a permanent, robust body.
They did. They
Yep.
strongly recommended a permanent intergovernmental council under Article 263. They saw it as a continuous forum for policy consultation, not just something to be called when there's a crisis. It was all about making states feel like equal partners.
Okay, the second big mechanism, and this was a huge philosophical shift in planning, is NITI Aayog.
Right. NITI Aayog replaced the old Planning Commission in 2015. And this was a monumental change. It was a move away from that top-down command and control model of allocating funds.
And NITI Aayog is explicitly built on cooperative federalism. How does that work in practice?
Its whole mission is to treat states as equal partners. It acts as a knowledge hub and a think tank, providing strategic advice. Crucially, unlike the Planning Commission, it doesn't control the money. That's now largely the Finance Commission. NITI Aayog focuses on long-term policy design and encouraging bottom-up planning.
So it's replaced fiscal control with intellectual influence.
Exactly. It's soft power research, data, policy ideas, instead of the hard power of financial approval. It's a much more federal approach to national planning.
And finally, we have the zonal councils. These are outside the formal constitutional structure, but they serve similar goals.
They're non-statutory advisory bodies. They were set up by the States Reorganization Act of 1956. The country was divided into 5 zones to foster interstate cooperation on things like economic planning, linguistic minorities, border disputes.
And the Union Home Minister chairs all of them. Again, that central touch.
It is. It reflects the view that even regional cooperation is part of the larger national development and security agenda. We should also mention the separate Northeastern Council, which was created by its own act in 1971 because of the region's unique challenges.
Now we have to turn to the most dramatic demonstration of the strong central bias, the emergency provisions in Part 8 of the Constitution.
This is where you see the truly unique, almost Janus-faced feature of the Indian Constitution. Its ability to completely transform its own character.
What do you mean by that?
The political system can shift from federal during normal times to entirely unitary during an emergency. And it can do this without any formal constitutional amendment. It's a built-in switch.
Okay, let's start with the big one. National emergency, Article 352. What are the grounds for it?
There are 3 grounds: war, external aggression, or armed rebellion. Now, that last one, armed rebellion, is important. It used to be internal disturbance, but the 44th Amendment in 1978 changed it to prevent misuse.
And once it's declared, what's the process for approval?
The proclamation has to be approved by both houses of Parliament, with a special majority within 1 month. It used to be 2 months, but that was tightened up.
And if it's approved?
It continues for 6 months, and it can be extended indefinitely as long as Parliament reapproves it every 6 months. During that time, the Center can give directions to any state, and Parliament can make laws on any subject on the state list. The whole system centralizes.
And what about fundamental rights? That's a huge implication.
A massive one. Under Article 358, when an emergency is declared for war or external aggression, the 6 rights under Article 19, freedom of speech, assembly, etc., are automatically suspended.
Automatically.
And Article 359 lets the president suspend the right to go to court to enforce other fundamental rights. But, and this is a critical check, the rights under Article 20 and Article 21, protection against conviction, and the right to life and personal liberty can never be suspended.
And the courts have a say in this now, right? It's not immune from judicial review.
Absolutely. The 44th Amendment made sure of that. The Supreme Court, post-Minerva Mills, clarified that a national emergency proclamation can be challenged in court if it was declared with malified intent or based on completely irrelevant facts.
Okay, now let's go to the state level. President's Rule, Article 356 and 365. This is the one we hear about all the time.
And it has dual grounds. First, under 356, is the failure of constitutional machinery in a state, usually based on the governor's report. The second and very unitary ground is under 365, if a state fails to follow directions from the center.
So that's the compliance hammer we talked about earlier.
It is. The approval process is also a bit less strict. It needs approval from Parliament within 2 months, and it can last for a maximum of 3 years with renewals every 6 months.
And when it's imposed, what happens to the state government?
The president can take over all functions of the state government. The state assembly can be dissolved or suspended, and Parliament starts making laws for that state. The center basically runs the state directly.
This was misused so often politically. The Supreme Court had to step in. We have to talk about the S.R. Bommai case from 1994.
The Bommai judgment is probably the single most important legal check on this unitary power. The Supreme Court laid down very clear guidelines.
What were the key ones?
First, the president's satisfaction is subject to judicial review. It's not absolute. Second, it must be used only as a last resort after a warning has been given. And most critically, Parliament has to approve the proclamation before the state assembly is dissolved. If a court strikes down the proclamation, the dismissed government has to be reinstated.
So it turned Article 356 from a political weapon into a true constitutional emergency provision.
It did. It forced the center to provide real justification, adhering to the Sarkaria Commission's view that it should be used very sparingly in extreme cases. It put a real check on that unitary default.
So we've really taken a scalpel to India's unique structure. If we synthesize this whole deep dive, the main takeaway for me is clear. India is this unique hybrid. It's a system that favors a strong center, but it still maintains these essential federal features.
And its most unique aspect is that constitutional ability for character transformation. The way it can seamlessly shift from federal to unitary and back again without a formal overhaul. It's a structure that was optimized for national survival in a huge, diverse, and sometimes fragile union.
Right. Now let's connect all this high-level structural knowledge directly to the kinds of challenges you might face in the mains exams. Let's link these polity features to broader socioeconomic issues.
You see clear linkages, especially on issues like resource distribution and poverty elimination. Questions about land reforms or agriculture productivity are directly tied to fiscal federalism. Land and agriculture are on the state list.
But the money often comes from the center.
Exactly. So what role do statutory grants under Article 275 play? How does the center use discretionary grants under 282 to influence state policies? You have to integrate the Finance Commission's role with the political use of these grants to write a good answer.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, what about questions on internal security?
Internal security is all about administration and police power. You see questions about the fifth schedule, which deals with tribal areas, and it's linked to left-wing extremism. This is a classic federalism issue. You have the local needs of autonomous areas versus the center's mandate to maintain order.
And when local machinery fails, the center steps in.
It steps in using the All India Services, the IPS, and often invokes President's rule. It shows how a state-level administrative failure can quickly become a central security crisis.
And finally, that really interesting link between global economic integration and domestic policy, like the Food Security Bill and the WTO.
That's a perfect nexus question. Food security involves both the center and states. But international agreements are exclusively a union power under Article 253. So if our food security bill violates WTO rules, it's the center that has to fix it, potentially overriding state concerns to ensure national compliance.
So understanding India's quasi-federal nature isn't just theory, it's the blueprint for analyzing almost every major policy challenge.
It allows you to analyze not just the policy, but the constitutional and administrative mechanics behind it. And that's what gets you high scores.
All right, here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on as you wrap up your study of this chapter. The framers built a system that is fundamentally unified yet functionally divided. So consider this. In what way does the continued reliance on all India services and the ever-present threat of Article 356 define India less as a cooperative union and more as a federation of convenience, especially when you look at recent amendments like the GST Council that further centralize financial power?
Reflect on how those ultimate control mechanisms fundamentally condition the choices and the real autonomy of the states. sometimes forcing cooperation under duress.
Thank you for joining us for this crucial deep dive into the federal system of India. We really hope this comprehensive summary helps your understanding and sharpens your focus for your preparation.
We covered a huge amount of ground, but the analytical clarity you'll gain from mastering these concepts is invaluable.
And remember, free notes and practice PYQs are waiting for you on our Telegram channel. For our Legend YouTube members, premium notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers are on Discord.
Please do hit that like button, share your valuable comment on the episode, and consider subscribing or joining our paid membership if you're able to. It helps us keep bringing these deep dives to you.
Until next time, keep studying hard and keep seeking those deeper insights.